In my experience, fandoms can be much like actual nations. They'll go to war with each other and have civil wars of their own. I've seen things get so bad that just about everyone in a particular fandom had to pick a side to avoid being utterly harassed by both. It really doesn't take much for a fandom to turn on itself, and today we have a fandom that unfortunately did all of that and more. Hello everyone, this is the RPG Monger, and welcome to Season 2 of the Fandom Files, the bi-weekly series where I take you into the dark hidden underbelly of each and every fandom. And now, after me waiting to cover it for the longest time, today we'll be diving into the fandom of RWBY, home to one of the most aggressive ship wars to date, but more on that in a bit. First, let me give you all a brief rundown on what RWBY even is in the first place. Created in 2013 by the late Monty Oum for Roosterteeth, RWBY is an animated web series that really has acquired quite a lot of fame in these past few years, and with that fame came a vast expansive fandom, which as always was one of the best when it was still relatively young. Though oddly enough, while many of the usual factors that lead to the downfall of fandoms were present, one of the most major and dividing blows to the fandom didn't even come from the people within it. Rather, it was drama surrounding a member of Roosterteeth themselves that ended up damaging the fandom's stability greatly. So before we get into the whole nightmare surrounding certain ships, I feel this needs to be addressed. On February 1st, 2015, the creator of RWBY, Monty Oum, passed away. At the time, RWBY was in the middle of production for its third season, thus leaving the series and the people who worked on it in a sort of limbo, not knowing what to do exactly. Though after a short while, it ended up being confirmed that yes, RWBY would still continue on, even after its creator's passing. Well, as things seemed to be going along pretty smoothly, all of a sudden, one of the people who had worked on RWBY alongside Monty Oum, Shane Newville, released a 36-page long document called An Open Letter to All Who Treasured Monty Oum. To say it started controversy would be an understatement, as among all the allegations within the document, it discussed the fact that RWBY was being handled in a much different way than how Monty would. With that, it split fans, especially those on Tumblr, quite greatly, because along with the heavily divisive topics within the letter, a good portion of the fandom split away and began to treat the other creators of RWBY as scheming villains, who in actuality had always had a decent hand in the story of RWBY. What was once a really peaceful fandom had in turn developed one of the worst civil wars ever seen in any sort of fan base, with people not only condemning co-writers that had no part in any of this, but just about anyone who didn't denounce the show. To this day, even though it's been a full year since that terrible shitstorm, you can honestly still see the scars on the fandom, because where that mortally wounded the fandom, it also made it much more susceptible to other issues, one of which I'm sure you're all very familiar with: the ship wars. While there are, of course, many ships surrounding RWBY, it'd be two specific ones that proved to start one of the most pointless feuds I've ever seen. Well, here you have Blake. Everyone loves her, right? Well, apparently in some cases, that love turned into an uninhibited obsession. In the case of RWBY, the two ships that started this war were Black Sun and Bumblebee, disregarding the goofy names. What started out as a peaceful discussion soon gave way to relentless arguing. Differing opinions would be met by harmful insults and supposed canon evidence. Hell, some people even went as far as to disrespect the late creator of the show, saying that Monty would have wanted this ship just because at one point he said that the show would have LGBT characters at some point, which for the record has held true with a specific character in the 5th season. To quote a user on Tumblr, if Roosterteeth doesn't make Bumblebee canon, they're not really doing what Monty wanted, are they? Honestly, all this shows is how far these people will go to supposedly protect their meaningless pairing. I mean, come on, how much of a scumbag do you have to be to use someone who has already passed away as ammunition in your argument? It's utterly ridiculous. Usually when ships become popular within a fandom, all it does is give way to nice fan art and insightful theories. But by now, these increasingly loud antagonizers characters were snuffing those out. It had gotten so bad that popular artists within the fandom just had to stop making RWBY fan art, since with every new drawing would come boatloads of harassment. Though soon, with the war still raging on as they kept going for each other's throats, they also went as far as to go after the voice actress of Blake, all because she tried to defuse the situation on Twitter. And even after deleting her tweet and apologizing profusely, those certain loud minorities within the fandom still took it upon themselves to keep up the harassment for a long while. Thankfully, with things not being as bad as they used to be in the current day, hopefully one day the entire ship war will just cease to exist. And honestly, if it isn't the ship war tearing the fandom apart by the seams, it's the awful hate-dom surrounding the series who claim to be fans themselves half the time. But despite everything I've mentioned thus far, however, when it isn't being affected by all those idiotic groups of people, the RWBY fandom can be pretty nice. On communities like that of Reddit, I've seen tons of healthy and fun discussions. Not to mention the fandom still produces a solid amount of fantastic fan art. In all honesty, after my observations, I'd say RWBY is one of the more positive fandoms I featured on the show, at least compared to some other ones. Though to all of those people who have actively tried to make the RWBY fandom worse, knowingly or unknowingly, this is what I have to say to you. OTPs, pairings, ships, whatever you want to call them. It's perfectly fine to express why you think a ship will become canon and discuss the topic with others of differing opinions, but just leave it at that. There is absolutely no need to prove that your ship is superior, because at the end of the day, when you participate in a ship war, nobody wins. I mean, come on, you don't make the show. Oh, and before I forget, to those who criticize others because they still watch RWBY after Monty's passing, you really need to take a hard look at what you're doing and ask yourself, is this really worth it? Well, there you have it. I really am sorry about this one being shorter than usual. This past month has been extremely hectic for me, and will probably only become more so in the upcoming weeks. As always, I must stress how thankful I am for all the fandom stories you've DM'd to me on Twitter. Please keep sending me more. And remember, do leave your worst RWBY fandom stories in the comments below, so I can then feature my favorite in the next episode of the Fandom Files. Here's my favorite from the last episode. I don't know how to shorten this story, but I made a MS Paint animatic back in 2015 with a song from a musical that I now appreciate way more instead of knowing one song from it. Right now, it's the second most viewed video on my channel. It was about how characters were questioning if Mettaton was gay or European. I don't know what I was thinking back then, and the idea itself is pretty dumb. But at the end of the song, I implied Papiton, Mettatonix papyrus, even though I didn't ship it whatsoever. I just thought it was funny to put in. After a while, the video exploded, and of course, with that comes the crazy fans. People were arguing that the video I made was dumb, wrong, and it was offensive to gay people and Europeans. People even began forcing their headcanons on me, like that of Mettaton is a girl, Mettaton is trans, or Papiton is a bad ship. The song's whole point is to be a joke, and yet people took it way too seriously. There are still people who want me to make more Undertale videos, and truthfully, I do have thoughts in mind, but the fandom really scared me to the point that I don't even want to put any of those out. Well, first of all, it truly is a shame that people did that to someone actually making a contribution to the community. I mean, do they want the fandom to become stagnant? And second of all, if you still want to make Undertale videos, go for it. If you let those terrible people keep you down, then you're only letting them win. Well, it's that part of the video again. Do check the iCard in the top right corner of the video to vote for what you want me to cover in the next episode of the Fandom Files. To make up for this one being a bit more lackluster than others, I put some really spicy fandoms in there this time around. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more like it, do subscribe, and today's cool thing of the day is Monty Oum. While I talked about him briefly before, right now I truly do want to dedicate this portion of the video to him, because the amount of work Monty put into RWBY is absolutely absolutely crazy. The work ethic the guy had was truly phenomenal, and it showed. Not to mention, Monty Oum was just as dedicated to the community that had formed around his brainchild, and you know what? That's pretty admirable. So here's to you, Monty Oum. May you never be forgotten for all the greatness you've brought to this world. So that being said, I'm the RPG Monger, and don't forget that each and every one of you are fantastic.